What is the first brand you remember in your childhood being resonant with you? The first brand you really loved?
Top of mind, because I didn't think about this question. I didn't know you were going to ask this. This sounds crazy, but I have to say McDonald's. I just remember the advertising sort of being, the early 70s, those brands were extremely powerful. And, the famous Coca-Cola ad on the mountaintop, early 70s. I remember that. I mean, that still sticks with
I'd like
me.
to
like to give the world a
Coke,
a Coke. I mean, I was probably 5-6 years old, and I remember watching that on our TV. So clearly I was obsessed with food, since I'm saying Coke and McDonald's.
Good favorite food. Tim Hortons. What about Tim Hortons?
No. Donuts. Yeah, that's probably why I have such an obsession with donuts. I grew up in the donut capital of the world.
Yes, you did. Lilian, I first met you in October 2017. Mm-hmm. And I was at the ANA meeting, the Association of National Advertisers, the biggest trade association in the States. And this is their big annual meeting where they pull in the masters of marketing and people give best practice presentations. And I was in the audience when you made your presentation 4 or 5 days after the shooting in Las Vegas at one of your properties. Mm-hmm. And I just want you, and I was so amazed. You explained why you came just a few days after that tragedy. And I still remember it vividly. It was one of the most remarkable, purposeful, meaningful presentations I've ever been in the room to listen to be moved by. Mm-hmm. So could you tell our audience a little bit about why you did that? Give some background, what you hope to achieve, because it would have been easier to stay at home.
Sure. It's funny just hearing you talk about it, Jim. I started getting sweaty palms again. It brings back some just, terrible memories, frankly, for me and for so many families and Las Vegas. The reality is the Sunday before the ANA conference, we had the largest mass shooting in the history of the U.S. at Mandalay Bay, one of our flagship properties, where 59 individuals unfortunately perished. And it was a real testament of crisis for the families, for the community, for our company, for our employees. It was something I hope none of us ever have to experience again. And to be completely candid, most of the days leading up to the ANA conference, I don't really remember well, because we were not sleeping and just working 24/7 to attend to the families and to our employees and make sure everybody was okay. And I remember sort of Tuesday or Wednesday, I kind of realized I had the ANA conference on Friday, and I had our public relations crisis team. We were sitting in the boardroom working through things. And I said, you know what, I'm supposed to speak at this really big marketing conference on Friday, and I'm sort of torn what to do. I said, I don't want to leave my team. I don't want to get on a plane. I feel like I'm abandoning everyone here. I said, but part of me really feels a need to go in to say that, we're going to come together. Life will move forward. The strength of the community is going to bring us through this. And it's important to continue and bring some normalcy back to our lives and to go really represent Las Vegas at a time of crisis. And so we talked about it, and the PR firm and our PR team said, you know what, you should absolutely go. And I remember flying over on the plane to Orlando, and it was the first time in days I had a chance to even think about my presentation. And I said, what am I going to say? And I said, I'm really going to talk about the fact that I'm doing this for the community. I'm doing this for the people of Las Vegas to show them that we are going to come together under a crisis, which we did. The community really supported one another, came together. The support we had was just astonishing. And I just felt it was important to say, we're going to be okay. And so that was sort of the impetus of getting myself to the ANA. And it was very cathartic, actually. It was a very healing process for me to be able to kind of step away from what was going back here and just tell our story.
Well, what I remember about that story, beyond your courage to come and share it on behalf of your people and the people of Las Vegas, was you talked about sort of finding your place in the world as a company and as a set of brands. You talked about your company's purpose, and you went way beyond a slogan or a tagline or a beautiful video, but you went to what this meant to your 77,000 employees. And you also talked about how things changed in recruiting and measurement and performance reviews. It was one of the best stories I've ever heard on a brand purpose coming to life, being activated. Could you share a bit of the status of that today and what you have learned about bringing a purpose to life on a really interesting brand like yours? I think it would be enormously helpful for our audience.
Sure. Well, so as just a bit of background for those who may be not as familiar with the story, when I joined the company, we had grown out of acquisition. And so we have 27 resorts around the world that we operate, but each one sort of operated like their own little, I call them fiefdoms, because they're large, billion-dollar businesses in and of themselves. And we realized that the individual brands like Mandalay Bay or Bellagio or Aria have very strong brand recognition and brand equity, but nobody sort of knew who MGM Resorts was. Nobody understood that there was a parent brand that owned all of these properties and a loyalty program to support them. And so we started the work to really understand, how are we going to position ourselves as MGM Resorts? What's in our DNA? What do we want to stand for in the hearts and minds of consumers? And what purpose do we play in consumers' lives? And so we really transitioned ourselves from a traditional casino and hotel company to really an entertainment company, because we had been talking about ourselves as a casino and hotel company. And that's not really who we are and our purpose in consumers' lives. And so as part of that, we built this, campaign, which was, the tagline, if you will, was this idea of welcome to the show, which still exists today. But we wanted to make sure, at least I wanted to make sure, that this wasn't just going to be a hollow brand campaign where we had a sexy TV ad, we did some interesting stuff on digital. We wanted to make sure that all, at the time, and now we actually have more, but at the time that all 77,000 employees really understood their role in delivering the brand promise. So whether you're working at front desk, whether you're working in a nightclub, whether you're at a casino blackjack table or a restaurant, that you really understood what your role was to deliver wow moments. So we rallied behind this notion, brand promise, that MGM Resorts exists to entertain the human race. And so for about 18 months, my closest partner in crime on this initiative was our chief human resources officer. And we decided together that we would train all employees and we would really change the culture of the company. So we aligned brand with culture, which had never been done before. And we really started to think about, what does a brand mean to consumers? What does it mean to our employees? And how can we align our culture with the DNA of the brand? And so we did that. We trained all of our employees on the brand promise, and more specifically on the leadership behaviors we expected, and on the guest service standards that we expected. And we used, to make it simple for our employees, we used the acronym SHOW. So S stood for smile and greet the guest, H was hear their story, O was own the experience, and W was wow the guest. And so now today, which is 2-3 years later, if you walk around any of our properties, you'll still see that we still talk about show. We still talk about welcome to the show. We still talk about leadership behaviors. We still actually, when we do mid-year reviews, it's around the leadership behaviors around brand and culture that we measure people on. We, when we recruit people, we talk about the fact that they're, joining an entertainment company, or they're here to entertain the human race. And our packages, we make them such that they feel like you're joining an entertainment company. And most recently, I think what I would share with you that we just launched in the last year, which I think is super interesting, is we wanted to go one step further, and we wanted to empower all of our employees to own the guest experience. And so historically, if you had a problem, perhaps there was a problem in your room, hopefully not, but it does happen, or you maybe didn't have a great experience at one of our restaurants, you would probably complain to somebody and they would have to call a manager, and then that would get escalated. And then you'd write a letter to the CEO, or gosh knows what happens. And we said, no, we want all of our employees, whether you are cleaning, housekeeping, whether you're a blackjack dealer, whether you're working in a restaurant, we want you to be empowered to fix the guest issue right there and on the spot. And so all employees have basically a hotline to call whoever they need to fix an issue, whether it's engineering, whether it's the restaurant. And they also have the ability to financially, if needed so, compensate a guest. And so they have basically these, we're in the process of digitalizing them, but basically vouchers that they give to guests for free food and beverage or free drinks, saying, Ms. Tomovich, I'm so sorry you had this issue, but here's a voucher that we're going to give you to go have dinner, courteous of MGM Resorts, to apologize for the issue that you ran into. And so there was a lot of tension and nervousness when we wanted to roll this campaign out, because as you can imagine, our CFO is saying, well, wait a minute, this is going to cost us millions of dollars. You've just given cash in every employee's hand to compensate potential situations with guests. And what we found was, when you empower employees, they will 9 times, if not 99% of the time, make the right decision. And we're not seeing people go wild issuing, free comps, as we call them, but they're really purposeful, and they have significantly increased our net promoter score around customer satisfaction and problem solved, and a bunch of other key metrics. So that was a very long answer to your question, but
no, it's a wonderful answer. There's so many lessons in there, Lilian. So many of the leaders I meet struggle with the activation of purpose and the measurement. You've been able to do that. So what can we learn from you? What were the conditions that made that work in your culture? What would be your advice to other companies and other categories to follow your lead in terms of all in, activating this, making it meaningful for people, seeing the business results, which you have seen? So what conditions have to be true for this to happen the way it has here?
It's a great question. I think one is, there was, number one, there was just real recognition from the very top of the house, from our CEO down, that we were in a position where we needed to sort of unify and become one company, one culture. And so that recognition and the support all the way from the CEO down, I think, was number one and most important. Because our CEO, Jim Murin, he actually went ballroom to ballroom, literally training with us on the brand and the culture and what he expected from leaders. And so getting that kind of support, not surprisingly, from the top is incredibly important. Second is really having partners throughout the business that understood the potential and the value, which is not always easy to do. But our Chief Human Resources Officer, as I said, Michelle Detondo, she got it right away. I mean, her and I were inseparable for 18 months, and she understood how this could impact all of the work she was doing around employee engagement and recruiting. And so, again, just getting that buy-in and socializing with folks why there was a need. And remember, this was, 2015. And so it was only, a few years back that we were still kind of recovering from the deep recession. And so people really understood that we needed to change and think about our business differently.
So what companies or leaders have you been inspired by on this journey, or do you feel like you've been creating it on your own?
I mean, there is so many amazing organizations doing great purpose-driven work. Of course, I, like everybody else, like to read and learn. But at the end of the day, it is very customized to your business and the work that you do and the types of consumers you have and the leadership team you have. And so there isn't an easy playbook for it, I will say. It really comes down to, really digging deep into the soul of the DNA of your business. And sometimes I think ours may be a little bit easier than others because we are not a digitally native business. We're a bricks and mortar business that really started our roots in entertainment. So that was a little bit easier for us, I think, than it is for some brands.
Yeah, maybe easier, but you're still, what, 77,000 people last time I heard you speak or something like that?
83,000 now.
83,
Yeah.
83, and sales of over 10 billion,
12.
right?
Yeah.
12
Yeah.
billion.
Yeah.
So you are pulling it off in a reasonably complicated business model,
Yes.
right?
I absolutely. That is the one thing. It's funny when I was just interviewing somebody when I recruit, I always say that to people. I say, listen, this is unlike any other business you'll be in. When you really think about it, we are the third largest entertainment company in the world, next to AEG and Live Nation from a ticket sales perspective. We are the largest non-chain restaurant in the U.S. We do about $2.5 billion in food and beverage. And then you think about our hotel. We have the largest hotels in the world. You think about our nightlife and our DJs, our clubs, our spas. And so when you join MGM Resorts, you're joining a mashup of 5 or 6 really significant businesses. And so it's very diverse, very challenging, but at the same time very unified in our mission to entertain the human race and to really deliver wow moments to our guests.
Yeah. So Lilian, I want to move a little bit away from purpose at MGM to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So here you are, Chief Experience Officer, Chief Marketing Officer of this amazing company. Mm-hmm. And you came out of studying sociology at Brock University a few years back. Mm-hmm. So could you tell us a little bit about your journey from studying sociology in Canada, and I think you were an athlete as well, mm-hmm. And I know you spent a good bit of time at MasterCard, which is an amazing mm-hmm. company and brand as well, but really different from what you're doing now.
Yeah.
So take us through how you got to where you are and what have been some of the really pivotal moments for you in your development, milestones, if you will, to get you to the amazing position and company you mm-hmm. are in today.
Well, sure. So I did, you're absolutely right. I did get an undergraduate degree in sociology, and then I was sort of toiling between law school and graduate doing my MBA, and I decided ultimately to do my MBA. And this was the early 90s, and I graduated and I could not get a job. And, my friends were taking jobs, here, there, and everywhere in sales and anything they could get. And I was really determined to get a job in marketing. And so I always tell people now, you do need patience. And I spent close to a year working retail jobs and anything I could get until I knew I could land sort of that Fortune 500 entry-level position that I wanted, that I felt would start my career off on the right step. And so I ended up interviewing, with a couple packaged goods companies and Citibank at the time and American Express. And I decided, this whole thing about CRM and at the time, direct marketing and database marketing was kind of interesting. And I thought, well, if I go to packaged goods, it'll be focused on brand, but I really want to understand this direct marketing piece. So started my career at Citi. And it's funny because every place I went after that, there was always something that I picked up from either a leader that I worked for or the work I was actually doing. So at Citi, I really learned the fundamentals of database and direct marketing. So I spent a few years there, and I had a wonderful boss at the time who really taught me this idea of curiosity and always asking questions. What if, consider that. So I picked that up absolutely from her. And then I went on to the mobile phone industry business and worked for a company called Rogers, which is similar, I guess, to a Verizon
sure.
here,
mm-hmm.
conglomerate. And what I loved about that business is it was a duopoly at the time, and of course, highly competitive in the mid 90s. And I really learned about competition and pricing strategies and a lot about customer segmentation, and found that work just really, really fascinating. And then from there, I went on to it's a company owned by Alliance Data Systems now called Loyalty One, which at the time was called the Air Miles Reward Program, still the most successful, I think, loyalty program in Canada, if not globally, probably in the top 5. And it was about coalition loyalty. So it was a loyalty program that we sold to a variety of retailers, and people participated in it. In fact, something like 80% of Canadian households are part of this program. And I spent 7, 8 years there. And really, that's where I learned a lot about a lot of different businesses, because we worked with gas, grocery, pharma, big retail. And so I had a variety of roles there over 7, 8 years. And again, I just learned a lot of fundamentals about what drives different businesses and what are their drivers of profitability and revenue. And then from there, I joined MasterCard, another just fabulous company and organization, worked for some amazing people, and really went back to my brand roots. And eventually, ran all of marketing in Canada and then came to the US. But working on the Priceless brand was just a really special time for me in my career and for MasterCard, and the power of branding and the differentiator it played for MasterCard versus our competition was still to this day. It's an amazing story. And then I got a call to come to MGM Resorts. And like most of us who get a call, I get this voicemail saying it's a $10 billion hospitality and entertainment company. They're looking for a chief experience marketing officer. Are you interested? And I remember coming home saying to my husband, geez, I think they have the wrong person. I mean, I've been in financial services for 7, 8, 9 years. I know nothing about that side of the business. He must have the wrong person. Anyways, long story short, I think the recruiter got me on the phone the next day. And we ended up having a great conversation. And he said, I really want you to go meet the president, Bill Hornbuckle of MGM Resorts. So I was so intrigued and fascinated by this whole business and industry. I thought, well, I'm going to go. I'm sure he's going to quickly say no once he meets me. And finds out, what my background is. But, we absolutely hit it off. And I was just extremely fascinated by the opportunity to actually step out of my comfort zone and go into some industries that I knew nothing about, and make a move across the country to Las Vegas, which, at the time seemed crazy. And so, I've had some great mentors along the way. But I do want to mention the most important thing I learned along my career. And this goes back to one of my very first jobs, and I talk about him often, is John Wright. So I worked with him at the Air Miles Reward program, and he really taught me the power of people and relationships. And I, to this day, am forever indebted to him, because I realize none of my success could have been done without the people and the relationships that I have, and most importantly, the people that have worked for me. And so people, as I say, people matter. And I think that's been a recipe for some of my success is really understanding how to treat people, how to value people, respect, dignity, and how to get the best out of your team is what I think drives most great leaders to success. And
I also noticed that you're on a board, DineEquity, with IHOP and with Applebee's. Has that been helpful for you as a CMO at MGM Resorts? And how have you found that experience?
Yes, that's a great question. Absolutely love it. It's a terrific board. I've got some amazing fellow board members that I actually consider friends and ask them for advice. But for me personally and professionally, when I joined Applebee's, this was 2.5 years ago, Applebee's was on a tailspin, not in the right direction. And there was questions actually whether Applebee's would survive as a brand. And so when I joined, we went about hiring a new chief executive officer and really starting on a turnaround story for Applebee's, and invested a lot of time in figuring out what the right strategy would be to basically make sure that the brand could survive. And 2.5 years later now, it's one of the fastest growing casual family dining restaurants. Again, we've had something, almost 6 quarters of consecutive growth, outpacing all of our competitors. And so to be part of a turnaround story for a brand that most people considered dead 2.5 years ago, that had just, had missed the boat in terms of what consumers were looking for, has been really incredibly interesting work for me, meaningful work. And, learned a lot actually through the process. A lot of good discipline there.
Have you found the concepts that you've been working at MGM Resorts, on purpose and activating the people and, kind of embedding the sense of purpose for the organization? Have those concepts been the same things that have been kind of working to bring Applebee's back?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a combination as usual. It's never usually one thing, but it certainly is about bringing in the right leader to lead the people, defining what a high performance culture looks like. And then, of course, looking at everything from who is our customer, what's the right product mix, what's the pricing strategy, and recognizing this is an interesting story about Applebee's. Like most marketers, they had shifted most of their media spend to digital and online because that's what you're supposed to do as a marketer and that's where your people are. But in reality, what we realized with Applebee's and the type of product and the consumer it serves, TV still was a heavy driver of traffic for Applebee's. And so we brought in a new chief marketing officer who said, I want to do some testing here because I think we've over-rotated on digital at the cost of traditional TV. And my sense is that this audience still is very much driven by TV. And so we kind of flipped it. And TV is an amazing channel for Applebee's and in fact for IHOP as well. And so it's about finding that right balance and not necessarily following the trend for where you should be investing as a marketer, but really understanding where your consumers still are today.
So Lilian, I'd like to ask you a little bit about how you stay creative, how you stay energized, how you stay fresh. What are your rituals that others might learn from in terms of how you spend your day, your week, your month? How do what role does exercise play in there? Being with your customers, being with your people. What kind of people do you hang out with? What are some of your routines, rituals, practices that are interesting that you think others might find interesting?
Sure. Well, I'm really fortunate. This is what I love about this business versus perhaps when I was at MasterCard, where you can sort of touch and feel the consumers. To your point, when I want to sort of get energized and really think about what we're doing, my office happens to be, we're in the Bellagio right now. I take, a step outside my office and I'm literally on the casino floor in 2 minutes. And so spending time and just watching consumers, how they behave, what they're looking at, what they're talking about, talking to them, not telling them who I am, but having those conversations and not waiting for a focus group, for me is incredibly energizing. We actually have a couple lounges here. They're VIP check-in areas, and that's where our VIPs often sit, and they have drinks and coffee. And sometimes I'll go in there and I'll just sit and pretend I'm a guest and a consumer, and I'll just listen to the conversations, what they're talking about, how they're feeling, what they're experiencing, what they like, what they don't like. So I try and do that as much as I can, and I try and bop around to all of our properties, and I try and eat at the restaurants, go to the salons. So that's definitely one of the things I do from a business perspective. Like everybody else, I'm obsessed with social media. I spend way too much time. I think my iPhone depresses me every week when it tells me how much screen time I've had. It's kind of not something I like to see, but I love, obviously, following all the social channels and Twitter and seeing what's happening. I love to read, but I love magazines. I don't read a lot of books, but, Fast Company, one of my favorite magazines. I love reading Fast Company. So whenever I'm flying, which is usually when I catch up on my reading, whether it's Ad Age or Ad Week or Fast Company, do a lot of that. I don't exercise as much as I should, although shout out to Peloton. I got my Peloton, and so I'm trying to get myself on that a little bit more frequently. And like everybody else, just really busy lives and trying to carve out those times to re-energize. I love going to conferences too. I mean, the ANA, if I can get to the Masters of Marketing, that is the one that I definitely try to attend every year. I find it incredibly invaluable. I sit on the ANA board, so chatting and having a network of other CMOs, I think is very important, people that you can reach out to. I try and reach out to people in my industry, other CMOs at Caesars and Wynn. Again, it's about people and connections and learning from each other.
Yeah, I think the ANA conference is just the best in the world for telling stories and learning from others in the cases. Yeah. I agree with you. Are there any other conferences or experiences that you find as a senior marketer that are really helpful?
Well, of course, or can, depending on how you want to say it. That experience, I think, is second to none. Of course, it's not, even just from a networking perspective, last year I ended up sitting on a panel with somebody I didn't know from Red Bull, and we ended up striking up a really interesting conversation, and now are doing a pretty significant project together. So, you can sit in the audience and listen and learn, but just the opportunity to network with individuals, and oftentimes, more times than not, it turns into a real business relationship.
Mm-hmm. So I want you to share with us one thing about Lilian that we would not find online.
Oh my gosh. Well, there's a couple things. So in Canada, maternity leave is actually 12 months. And what happens is people tie on their vacation. And so you're actually out of work for 14 months. And so the thought of that to me was, although it was exciting, it was also terrifying because I don't like to sit idle. And I remember thinking, what am I going to do? So I actually started a diaper bag business when I was on maternity leave. And at the same time, we had just renovated a house that we had bought in the city that was built in the 1930s, and it was featured in a magazine. So here I am on maternity leave. My daughter was maybe 3 or 4 months old at the time. And I started getting calls, people saying, would you help us renovate our house? Well, I'm looking for an interior designer. I'm looking for an interior decorator. And so I, on a complete whim, decided, yes, I would like to do that. And I remember I took my daughter in the little car seat, and I would meet with clients, and I would help them redesign their living rooms, their kitchens, everything. And I actually ended up having quite a nice little business. And by the time 14 months came around, I was like, geez, I wonder, should I become an interior designer full time? Is this my calling? And I thought, no, I better stick to marketing, and there's probably some more job security here. But that was my little blip that you probably won't hear or see online, but I was, for a brief moment, an interior designer.
That's hilarious. Well, you might come back to it someday, right?
Maybe.
So are you a serial home renovator? Is that a hobby of yours?
I am not, because I don't have the time, but I can tell you I would. So if I was retired, I absolutely would love to do that. I just love I love design and houses and potential and opportunities. For me, it's, reaping the rewards of your vision. So it kind of aligns. It's the creative side.
Absolutely. So years from now, when you restart the diaper bag company or your interior design company, what do you hope all the people who have worked for you say about you? I hope they think that I cared and I loved everybody that I worked with, and I treated them with respect, and I knew how important they were to me and to the work that we do. And it's funny because literally before this podcast started, my assistant's partner, he happened to be here for lunch, and he came into my office, he shut the door, and he put his arm around me. He said, can I tell you something? And I said, sure, what is it, Bob? And he said, I just wanted to thank you. And I said, for what? He said, for treating Susan with such respect and being so kind and good to her. And this is obviously his girlfriend and my assistant. And I just went, oh, Bob, you have no idea how much that means to me, because at the end of the day, I think I probably got this from my father. That's all I really care about. I hope I make an impact on people's lives in a positive way. And I hope I make an impact on the company and the organization I work for, and I help drive results. But at the end of the day, that's meaningless for me if people don't cherish the relationships that they have with me and feel, valued and respected and treated with dignity. And so remembering me as being a good person and a people person is really all I care about. The chairman and CEO of Procter & Gamble, when I joined, said to me as a young manager, he said, people will forget the quarters and the fiscal years.
That's right.
They will not forget the impact you had on their lives.
So true. 100% true. And I'm not perfect, but I try damn hard every single day.
So before we move into, that was a sweet story, by the way. Thank you for sharing it, Lilian. Before we move into some industry questions to end the interview, we did notice on social media that you just took your daughter on a college visit.
Yeah.
So I want to, I get a lot of questions from young people, and I teach a lot of young people these days about how to blend their life they're personal and professional. And everyone struggles with it. There's no magic bullets. But, you just had an experience with your daughter. I'm sure business was going on while you were visiting colleges. How do you manage a blended life? You seem from the outside to be doing it very well. Do you have any tips, secrets,
Oh,
thoughts?
gosh. Well, first of all, I get comfortable with complete and utter chaos. And so I'm kind of comfortable with chaos and going 90 miles an hour. In fact, I feel uncomfortable when I'm not going 100 miles an hour. I don't know how to operate in a situation where I don't have multiple things happening. And so it's interesting. The week that we did college tours was a couple weeks before we were about to do a major reorganization at work. And so I was anxious about going on this trip, but knew it was so important that, I had to go. And so like everybody else, I was on my phone. I remember we were doing a college tour at Santa Clara, University of Santa Clara. And guess what? I was, as my husband and daughter were touring, I was on a conference call. And then the next day I was supposed to go horseback riding and I got an urgent call and I ended up staying in the hotel room for most of the day. And so to your point, there is no perfect situation, but you find a way to make it work. But I always tell people, but you have to feel comfortable with this idea of chaos and just not having, your life completely planned out minute by minute. And I think as soon as you recognize that it's not going to be this idyllic situation and it will be very disruptive, your life, the more easier it becomes. So I've accepted it. This is the way it is. But I try and carve out, of course, time where, this morning's a perfect example. My daughter texted me from school, although she's not supposed to be on her phone. And she texted me and she's like, Mom, I need these. She's running for school president.
Good for her.
Yes. And she, forgot these
What's her slogan? What's her slogan?
Well, it's actually kind of clever. She's got these posters. There's multiple slogans going on. We'll have to, that's another whole story there. But she forgot these chocolates and I had to get to the office. But of course, as every mother, I'm like, no, I really want to get these for her. So I called my assistant and I said, you have to move this meeting. It happened to be a meeting she could move. So I could go to the CVS and get these chocolates and drop them off. And so it's like every working mom, you're just trying to find those moments that really matter and be present and do it.
Absolutely. Actually, your answer about being comfortable with chaos, I want to ask Kristen Lemkow at JP Morgan Chase the same question on another podcast. She had the exact same answer.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I love it.
So you two should chat. I know you do, but you should chat about that very issue. You'll see.
Yeah,
so,
that's great.
So you're working sort of right now on the ultimate lifestyle brand, right? MGM Resorts and all your sub-brands. When does a brand become a lifestyle? Everyone wants their brand to become a lifestyle, no matter what category they are in. Mm-hmm. So when and how do you think a brand becomes a lifestyle? Because then it goes into a very rare group, who sort of have amazing loyalty, amazing affinity. So what's some of your learning about that?
Well, I think, when we look at traditional lifestyle brands, when we talk about the Nikes or the Pelotons or the Apples, et cetera, I think those brands have been successful in becoming lifestyle brands because they sort of, at least in the fitness category, give you an opportunity to be a better version of you. So brands that make you feel better about who you are as a human being, I think become lifestyle brands. And also brands that you feel like you can't live without. They have become so purposeful in your life that you feel like not only do they make you better as a human being, but they make your life easier as a human being, and you feel like you can't live without them. Then I think you're kind of circling the waters of being really a lifestyle brand. If you're a brand that people really don't feel like you're making their life better, easier in some way, shape, or form, you really don't have a chance at becoming, a quote unquote lifestyle brand.
Mm-hmm. So is there a marketing campaign that you have not done that just has blown you away, that you just say, wow, that's picked me up, that's amazing?
Well, there's so much great work out there right now, and I'm just in awe of some of the work my fellow CMOs are doing. I've really enjoyed watching the evolution, and I guess I've been paying closer attention because it happens to be in my category, but the work that Airbnb does. I'm really I really sort of bowed down to them because I remember, some of their work a few years ago where they talked about don't just go to Paris, live in Paris or live like a local. And I just thought that was so smart because they tapped into that consumer insight around wanting to be, people are eager for experiences. We're in the experience economy. They don't want to go to, the restaurant where everybody should go. That's sort of a tourist trap. And so that whole campaign about live like a local, I thought was so smart. And then, of course, they aligned it with their product offering and their hosting and all of that. And then what they did, I think it was last year, their campaign around everyone welcome. I think I can't remember the exact.
You belong.
You belong. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
You belong. I just thought was, again, really smart work because they were getting to the core of humans and how they felt. And, we're going in this country and in this world, we're going through a period of divisiveness and this idea of trying to bring people together and communities together, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation. Saying, you're welcome here, I thought was just right on point.
Mm-hmm. So brands sometimes screw up, right? Or organizations screw up, and they get on their heels, and they have they lose trust, they stumble, and it's happening. Obviously, with the social channels, things get amplified very quickly. So, what's some of your advice for a brand that loses trust? If you were on a brand right now that suddenly, and certainly Facebook's in the middle of a lot of things, the financial industry back, at the recession, a lot of them, had bad behavior and they're crawling out of that.
Yeah.
So what's your counsel? You're someone who lives brand purpose. So I think it's interesting your take on that. How do you rebuild trust?
It's a great question. The first thing I will say is it doesn't happen overnight, as we know, and it takes time. They say time heals all wounds. It takes time, but number two is it's not dissimilar to, personal relationships. If trust is broken with personal relationships, what do you need to do to reinstate that trust? Number one is, acknowledging and saying, look, as a brand, we did X, Y, Z. We did not realize the impact on our customers or partners, whatever the case may be. We take full acknowledgement and responsibility for that. I think that's important. So brands have to come clean with what they did, why they did it, take responsibility for it, and then talk about what are they going to do from here on forward and talk the walk, really talk the walk. Because I find where brands slip is they may do the first three steps and they say they're going to do X, Y, Z in order to fix the situation, but then they don't deliver on that. And it's that consistent delivery of what you said you were going to do, when you said you were going to do it, and how you were going to do it, I think is most important. And that repeated behavior will slowly get trust back. And frankly, there's going to be a percentage of consumers that will never trust you again. But hopefully that frozen middle, as I like to call them, hopefully you can kind of push them back to your side again with consistent, reliable behavior.
So brand purpose, you're at the leading edge of living brand purpose in your company and being a leader who lives it. What's the next chapter of brand purpose? Is it a fad? I hope not. But where does it go next? What's brand purpose 3.0 for you, for your company, or even for the industry?
That's a great question. I still think, and I haven't really thought about this, so this is going off the top of my head here. I still feel like a lot of brands talk about brand purpose, but when you still look at how they operate and the business they're in, you can still call them on it and say, no, you say that, but you're really not doing that. And so I think there's going to be sort of a reckoning where consumers are going to say, I heard you say that, but now I really want to see what you're doing about it. I guess the best example for me of a brand who really has a great defined brand purpose, but actually down to the core is living it, which I think are two different things, saying that you have a brand purpose and really making all your business decisions based on that are two very different things. But I love what CVS did. When CVS said, we're about, making sure that people, we're a health provider, for lack of better words. I'm not going to say it as eloquently as them, but we're here to make your lives healthier. When they stopped selling cigarettes, even though it was, I don't know how many millions of dollars of profit to them, when they stopped doing that, that to me is a brand that actually is not even, is talking about brand purpose, but truly living brand purpose. I mean, that I think was a bold move, and I applaud the CEO for that decision. And so I think when you say what's 2.0 or 3.0, it's really making sure that it's not just empty talk, that you're really looking at your business end to end, top to bottom, left to right, and really making sure that you're living it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's going to, the future is about activation, living it, as you say, and also measuring it.
That's right. Yeah.
And you've been big on that, but I think we're still in the early stages of really great measurement of purpose and linking it to results, both within your organization and with your customers. And I think we have room for more innovation there as we go forward.
Absolutely. Yes. Totally.
So Lilian, I sort of want to end this interview on a lightning round.
Yeah.
Great. And so what's a non-MGM brand right now that you cannot live without?
Oh, I'm such a huge fan of Delta. I love Delta. It is my airline, and I could not live without them. I have anxiety if I have to fly somebody outside of Delta.
It's funny. We were talking to Scott Galloway on a previous podcast, and we talked a lot about Delta, and we're going to get the Delta CMO on the podcast.
Oh, good.
But I'm also I fly a lot of miles with Delta. I will make a connection on Delta to avoid another airline.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, my assistant sometimes looks at me and she says, "Really, Lily?" But I will too. I absolutely, that's how much I adore Delta. Yeah, they've done such being Canadian, I didn't always fly Delta, but their level of service and their commitment to the guest experience is just phenomenal. I think they've done a great job.
Yeah, and you talk about your 82 or 83,000 people. It seems like everyone I meet at Delta, they care.
Yes.
And they're honest, they're authentic, and if they make a mistake, they're straightforward about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all I want. I want transparency and honesty.
Yeah, so I can't live without my Delta.
So a book you're reading now that's interesting, or a book that's had an impact on your life?
You know what? As I mentioned, I don't read a ton of books because I don't have the time span, but I did read just 6 months ago, I finished, which I really enjoyed, was Shoe Dog, Phil Knight's book.
Yeah, I did. Really, I read that as well.
That was really, easy read, really enjoyable. Loved just hearing kind of the story from his point of view. So I liked that. I liked that book a lot.
What was your biggest lesson out of that one? Because I read that as well. I thought it was amazing.
Well, actually, one of my biggest ahas was I didn't think he was so nice to his employees, which I was a little surprised by that actually when I sort of looked at the narrative and the storyline between him and some of the key employees in his early days, and I thought that was really interesting. And it's certainly not the behaviors that I would want to have, but he was a different personality, but certainly perseverance and that instinctual, know what to do next and know what the consumer wants before they do was alive and well with Phil.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought perseverance and all. I didn't realize how long it took him to make any money.
Exactly.
So it was a long road, and he really hung in there.
He really did. Yeah, for sure.
So any series you're watching now that you just love on Netflix or Amazon or Hulu?
So you can't judge me with this first one, but I already told you. Go for it. I already told you I'm obsessed with homes, but I love the $1 million New York listings, $1 million LA. I love looking at the real estate and the houses.
Sure.
So I just, my husband cracks up. I make him watch those with me, but just got into, and I'm waiting for season 2, Succession on HBO, which is about the media sort of mogul family. Yep. And really enjoyed the first season. So I'm anxiously anticipating season 2.
Are you a podcast listener? Are you listening to any podcasts?
Well, I'll tell you the one I am obsessed with. So every night when I walk our dog, I love NPR is How I Built This with oh gosh, I can't remember his
Guy
name
Raz.
now. Guy Raz, thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah.
Absolutely, just love it. Just he's had great stories, great interviews, and frankly, great businesses to listen to. So that's my go-to podcast.
So what kind of dog do you walk at night?
She is a chocolate lab. She's adorable. Yeah, she's a chocolate lab, Roxy. So that's that's sort of my downtime. Although I'm even bad at that. I'll be walking her, texting on a call, and one day I'm going to trip and break my ankle. But
she probably loves that you're texting, right? She just
Exactly.
She wants to go.
Yeah,
Don't turn around.
Snipping. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
good.
So what's beyond Roxy? What's your biggest passion in the world these days?
Well, my daughter. That's kind of easy. My family, but my daughter's I just feel so fortunate. She is the coolest kid and somebody that I'd love to hang out with 24 hours a day. And it's just fun to I'm sure, you have children, so it's kind of fun to watch them grow and mature and get into their own skin. And it's super fun. Super fun.
It gets better and better.
Yeah.
We love having adult children. We love hanging out with them. We love, just hiking, just doing silly things together.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Lilian, one last question.
Sure.
Unless you want to keep talking about anything you want to keep talking about. But
no, it's okay.
Who would you like to listen to on this podcast? Who else should we get to join you?
I actually had to write their name down so I don't forget. Mark Viali. So I'm recently obsessed, and maybe your wife will know this, because my husband's like, oh, please, no, tell me you're not this when I'm on the iPad, but Real, which is the, they're going to be a unicorn here soon. They are luxury consignment, and it's basically the resale of luxury goods. And I've just become obsessed with Real. I buy on there, I sell on there. My husband just cracks up. He can't believe what's happening. But it's a fascinating story to me. That whole business and how it's existed for a long time, but how the CEO and founder was able to really turn this into virtually $1 billion business, I think now, people consigning and selling luxury goods. And so their CMO, I would just be, really interested to hear about that trajectory and that storyline and how they built that brand. So I think it's a super interesting business.
We will see what we can do. So what's your luxury brand of choice?
Well, I like them all. I like Gucci and I like Chanel, and Gucci's got, their designs have gotten a little crazy. I told them their footwear is, a little much. I said I miss a little bit more of their traditional Gucci, more conservative footwear collection. But the whole luxury goods business is another kind of interesting storyline. I'm sure there's some good CMOs to interview there as well.
Yeah, we'd like to get LVMH on the podcast, and I think we will. I think their stories will be incredible, and how they've adapted their model, and how they keep these brands that are very old, very relevant.
Well, it's interesting because in Las Vegas, for both Chanel and Louis, I mean, we have some of the highest performing stores, in the world. So it's kind of fun sometimes just hanging out in front of Chanel and just seeing, the customers that go in, they go out, and just how much money can be spent per transaction in the luxury goods category is still, you still scratch your head. It's pretty interesting. And the fact, what I love about luxury goods is it spans all. I mean, you stand in front of Louis Vuitton, or if I go to Chanel, just here at Bellagio, I mean, you have people who are, Gen Z or millennials who are 21 buying a handbag, and then you have the 80-year-old grandmother buying the handbag. And so how they've been able to stretch really across different demographics is super fascinating as well.
Oh, it's remarkable, and very few brands can do that.
Exactly.
That's why they'd be really great on the podcast, and we'll work on that too.
Yeah, just some homework for you.
Sure. So Lilian, this has been a joy, and thank you for spending an hour with us, and thank you for inspiring everyone on your purpose journey. You don't.
Thank you.
I think you don't fully understand how many people you inspire.
So thank you so much, and thank you for the time and having me on the podcast.